Imagine standing in a crowded room, surrounded by conversations, laughter, and the hum of life, yet feeling unseen. Not invisible, just unnoticed in a way that matters. For many men, this isn't just a passing moment. It's an echo they carry within them. It's not that they aren't loved or appreciated or even admired. It's that something deeper often goes unsaid. And it's not about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It's about something far simpler, far quieter, yet infinitely more profound. Men, for all the strength they're expected to embody, often crave something that has nothing to do with strength at all. It's not validation of their accomplishments, not praise for what they do, but a recognition of who they are. Beneath the layers of roles they play, provider, protector, achiever, lies a human heart that quietly asks, "Do you see me? Not for what I give, but for who I am when there's nothing left to give." It's easy to assume that men are built to thrive on external achievements. And maybe to an extent they do. But achievements, no matter how grand, can feel hollow when there's no one saying, "I see the effort. I see the weight you carry, and I'm proud of you." Not for what you've done, but for who you are. That's what they long to hear. And yet, so few ever do. Why is that? Perhaps it's because we've all been conditioned to believe that men don't need to hear it, that their strength comes from within, that they don't seek reassurance the way others might. But strength isn't the absence of need. Even the most resilient among us crave moments of tenderness. A simple acknowledgement can feel like a lifeline. And yet it remains elusive. Not because women don't feel it, but because the world has taught them to admire quietly, to love silently, and to assume that what goes unsaid is already understood. But here's the truth. Even the strongest soul hungers for recognition. Not for ego's sake, but for the soul's. Men don't need to be praised incessantly. They don't seek endless validation. What they long for is that rare moment when someone looks at them, not at their success, not at their possessions, not at their strength, but at their essence, and whispers, "I see you. I'm proud of you. You are enough." There's a quiet vulnerability in that longing, isn't there? Because to need something so simple, and yet to receive it so rarely, is a kind of ache many carry in silence. It's not about weakness. It's about being human. And perhaps that's why those words, when spoken, feel almost sacred, because they're not just words. A reflection back to them of their own humanity, their own worth, their own significance beyond what the world demands from them. And when they do hear it, when that one woman in 100 says it, it doesn't just touch them, it transforms them. It's like a weight they didn't even realize they were carrying is lifted. Suddenly, the battles they fight every day feel a little less lonely. Suddenly, their quiet perseverance feels seen. Suddenly, they are not just existing. They are being witnessed. Think about that. Think about the power we hold in the simplest of words. And think about how often we withhold them, assuming they are necessary, assuming they're already known. But love, true love, doesn't thrive in assumptions. It breathes in acknowledgement, in recognition, in the smallest moments when we say, "I see you, and I'm proud of the man you are." Maybe that's why men hold on to those words when they finally hear them. Because in a world that constantly pushes them to do more, be more, achieve more, that one rare voice tells them, "You are already enough." And isn't that what we all long for in the end? Not just to be loved, but to be seen. Because being seen is the purest form of love. You said expand key point 2 into a 650-word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech and aligns seamlessly with the other key points. Keep the tone conversational, avoiding any headings. Conclude with a strong, concise closing line for impact, and write it as though Priyanka Chopra himself is delivering it live to an audience. Do not directly mention his name. ChatGPT said, "There's something undeniably captivating about rarity." Think about it. The things we cherish most in life are often the ones we encounter the least. A fleeting sunset that takes your breath away, a delicate note in a symphony that lingers long after the music stops, a moment of stillness in a world that never seems to pause. Rarity doesn't just create value, it creates reverence. And perhaps that's why the words men long to hear resonate so deeply when they finally do. It's not because these words are complex or grand, but because they are rare, and in their rarity, they become sacred. We live in a world where words are abundant, almost excessive. Compliments, affirmations, validations, they fill our conversations, our social media feeds, our daily exchanges. But even in all that abundance, certain words remain elusive. Not because they're difficult to say, but because saying them demands something we often hesitate to give. Our sincerity, our vulnerability, our truth. When a woman says to a man, "I'm proud of you," or "I see how hard you're trying," it's not just the words themselves that matter. It's the weight they carry. It's the knowledge that these words were not given lightly, not scattered carelessly, but offered with intention. And that intention changes everything. Suddenly, those words are not just sounds, they are a recognition, a validation, a quiet reassurance that pierces through the noise of the world. But what makes these words so rare? Maybe it's because we often assume strength doesn't need acknowledgement. Maybe it's because we've been taught that love is felt more than spoken. Or maybe it's simply because we fear that saying too much might diminish the value of what we feel. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. Men often find themselves in a world where what they crave to hear is seldom said. And that scarcity turns those words into something almost mythical. Yet, isn't it fascinating how something as simple as a few words can hold so much power? It's almost paradoxical. In a world where we can express ourselves in 1,000 different ways, why do these specific words feel so rare? Perhaps it's because they require us to pause, to observe, to truly see the person in front of us. It's easy to admire someone's success from a distance, but to recognize their effort, their struggle, their humanity, that takes presence. And presence, like these words, is rare. When a man hears those words, especially from someone he loves, it's as if time slows down. For a moment, the weight he carries every day feels a little lighter. Not because his responsibilities vanish, but because someone has acknowledged them. And acknowledgement is a powerful thing. It tells us that our efforts are seen, our struggles matter, and our existence is valued. Not for what we produce, but for who we are. And it's not just men who crave this. We all do, don't we? We all want to be seen, not just in our brightest moments, but in our quietest struggles. We want someone to recognize the battles we fight silently, the strength we summon daily, and the effort we pour into simply being. And when that recognition comes, especially from someone we care about, it feels like a gift, a rare, precious gift that stays with us long after the moment has passed. But here's the thing, rarity is a double-edged sword. While it makes something valuable, it also makes it fragile. Words left unsaid for too long can create distance. Silence, while often beautiful, can also be lonely. And in our quest to protect the value of our words, we sometimes forget that love isn't something to be rationed. It's something to be given freely and abundantly. So, what if we didn't wait? What if we didn't withhold? What if, instead of letting our admiration sit silently in our hearts, we let it flow through our words? Imagine how that might change things. Imagine how that might heal things. Because sometimes, all it takes is a few rare words to remind someone that they are not alone in their journey. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? Not just love, but the quiet assurance that our efforts, our struggles, our very existence matters. You said, expand key point 3 into a 650-word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech and aligns seamlessly with the other key points. Keep the tone conversational, avoiding any headings. Conclude with a strong, concise closing line for impact and write it as though Priyanka Chopra himself is delivering it live to an audience. Do not directly mention his name. ChatGPT said, women are often described as mysteries, oceans too vast to be fully understood. There's a depth to them that feels infinite, layers of emotion, strength, and intuition that ripple beneath the surface. And within that depth lies something even more profound: silence. Not an absence of feeling, but a reservoir of it. Women don't always say everything they feel, not because they don't want to, but because they feel so much that words often seem inadequate. And sometimes they believe that love, when it's real, should be felt without needing to be spoken. But here's the paradox. While women often express love through actions, through care, through presence, men, more often than not, long to hear it in words. That longing isn't about reassurance or validation, it's about connection. Yet the very nature of women's love, the quiet strength of it, the subtlety, often leaves that longing unmet. Not because the love isn't there, but because it's wrapped in layers of silence that men don't always know how to unravel. This isn't to say that women are withholding. In fact, quite the opposite. Women feel deeply, love fiercely, and give endlessly. But their love often speaks in gestures rather than words. A thoughtful glance, an act of care, a quiet sacrifice. These are their love letters to the world. And for many, that feels enough. Why say what you feel when you believe your actions have already spoken for you? But the truth is, men often listen with their hearts more than we realize. And while actions matter, words have a way of cutting through the noise in a way that nothing else can. When a woman says, "I see you, I admire you, I'm proud of you," it doesn't diminish the love she's already shown. It amplifies it. It takes something already beautiful and gives it a voice. And in that voice, there is power. Yet, there's also fear. Fear that vulnerability might be mistaken for weakness. Fear that saying too much might expose too much. Fear that love, when spoken too often, might lose its magic. So many women hold back, not because they don't feel it, but because they've been taught to believe that love is more powerful when left unspoken, when felt rather than heard. And perhaps there's truth in that. But love, like all things, needs balance. Silence has its place, but so do words. Imagine being in love with someone and never hearing them say the things you most long to hear, not because they don't feel it, but because they believe you already know. Over time, that silence becomes heavy. It creates questions where there should be certainty. And it's not because the love isn't there, it's because it's hidden beneath layers of unspoken emotion. And so, men keep waiting for that moment when the woman they love will say the words they've longed for. Words that aren't grand or poetic, but simple and true. And when those words finally come, they don't just hear them, they feel them. Because those words, rare as they are, carry with them all the love that's been quietly building up over time. And in that moment, something shifts. The silence that once felt heavy becomes a canvas on which those words paint something unforgettable. But here's the thing, what if those words didn't have to be so rare? What if women, in all their depth and strength, allowed themselves to speak the love they feel so deeply? What if they trusted that vulnerability isn't a risk, but a gift? Imagine the bridges that could be built, the hearts that could be healed, the connections that could be deepened. Because while silence can be beautiful, words have the power to bring love to life in a way that nothing else can. And sometimes, the most profound thing we can do is simply say what our hearts have always known to be true. Because love, when spoken, doesn't lose its magic. It multiplies it. You said, expand key point 4 into a 650-word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech and aligns seamlessly with the other key points. Keep the tone conversational, avoiding any headings. Conclude with a strong, concise closing line for impact, and write it as though Priyanka Chopra himself is delivering it live to an audience. Do not directly mention his name. ChatGPT said, "Life has a way of weaving the most intricate designs, doesn't it? It's never linear, never predictable. It's a delicate balance of contrasts, light and shadow, silence and sound, love and longing. And somewhere within this grand tapestry, relationships are formed. Not by accident, but by design. Because nothing in this universe happens without purpose. Every connection, every emotion, every word spoken or left unspoken plays its part in the larger story unfolding around us. Love, too, is a dance of contrasts. It thrives on both mystery and revelation. It needs both silence and speech. Men and women, with all their differences, are not opposing forces but complementary ones. Men often seek words while women often express through actions. Men desire acknowledgement while women offer silent devotion. And while this can sometimes create distance, it's also what gives love its depth. Because love isn't meant to be simple. It's meant to challenge us, to transform us, to complete us. There's a certain beauty in the tension between what is desired and what is given. Men long to hear words that affirm them, while women often believe that love is best shown, not said. And yet, this very difference isn't a flaw, it's a design. A cosmic balance that ensures love is never stagnant. Think about it. If everything we wanted was always given to us in the exact way we wanted it, would we ever grow? Would we ever learn patience, understanding, empathy? Perhaps the reason men rarely hear the words they long for is not because women don't feel them, but because love, by its very nature, demands effort. It asks us to look beyond ourselves, to bridge gaps, to find harmony and dissonance. And that effort, that journey, is what makes love so profound. Men learn to cherish those rare words because they are not handed to them freely. And women learn to express their love not just through silence, but through the courage of spoken truth. But it's not just about men and women. It's about all of us. We are all part of this grand design, this intricate choreography of souls finding each other, losing each other, and finding each other again. Every challenge we face in love, every unspoken word, every longing, is a movement in this symphony. And just like music, it's the pauses, the silences that give the notes their meaning. Without silence, music would be noise. Without mystery, love would be ordinary. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the reason these words are so rare is because love itself is rare. True love. The kind that sees beyond the surface, beyond the roles we play, beyond the masks we wear. The kind of love that looks at a person and says, I see you. I see your flaws, your fears, your dreams, your struggles, and I'm still here. That kind of love isn't easy, it's not effortless, but that's what makes it real. Men crave those words not because they need constant reassurance, but because those words are a glimpse into that kind of love. A love that doesn't just admire from a distance, but embraces fully. A love that doesn't just witness success, but acknowledges the struggle it took to get there. And when women finally say those words, it's not just a moment, it's a culmination of every unspoken feeling, every silent gesture, and that's why it feels so powerful, because it's not just about the words, it's about everything behind them. But what if love didn't have to wait? What if we didn't have to rely on rarity to give love its value? What if we could find a balance? A way to preserve the mystery while still offering the revelation. Imagine a world where love isn't held back by fear, where vulnerability isn't seen as weakness, where words and actions walk hand in hand. Because in the end, love is the greatest design of all. And every word we speak, every silence we hold, every longing we feel, it's all part of the masterpiece we're creating together. And maybe, just maybe, the truest expression of love is knowing that every moment, every challenge, every unsaid word is leading us to something greater. You said expand key point 5 into a 650-word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech and aligns seamlessly with the other key points. Keep the tone conversational, avoiding any headings. Conclude with a strong, concise closing line for impact, and write it as though Priyanka Chopra himself is delivering it live to an audience. Do not directly mention his name. ChatGPT said, vulnerability is a word we often misunderstand. We associate it with weakness, with fragility, with being exposed. But what if vulnerability isn't about weakness at all? What if it's about strength? The kind of strength that doesn't need armor, that doesn't need to prove itself. What if vulnerability is simply the courage to be seen as we are, without the masks, without the walls? Men for so long have been told that strength means silence, that to be strong is to endure without complaint, to carry burdens without asking for help, to succeed without needing acknowledgement. And so they build walls around their hearts, around their fears, around their need for connection. But behind those walls is a truth they rarely share, the desire to be seen, to be valued, to be loved, not for what they do, but for who they are. And yet, asking for that feels impossible, because to ask is to admit need, and to admit need feels like failing the very idea of strength they've been taught to uphold. And so they wait, quietly, patiently, hoping that someone will see beyond the walls, beyond the silence, beyond the carefully constructed facade of invincibility. Hoping that someone will say, I see you. I see your strength, but I also see your fears. I see your resilience, but I also see your exhaustion. And I'm proud of you, not just for what you've accomplished, but for the courage it takes to keep going. Those words, so simple, carry a weight that many men don't even realize they've been holding until it's lifted. But here's the irony. Those words, so rare and so desired, require vulnerability not just from men but from women as well. To say, I'm proud of you, is to open one's heart, to risk being misunderstood, to offer love without the guarantee of it being reciprocated. It's easier sometimes to show love through actions, through presence, through silent support. But words are different. Words make love tangible. Words leave no room for doubt. Yet there's a fear that comes with speaking them. A fear that if we say too much, we give too much. That if we express our love openly, we lose our power. But love was never meant to be a power struggle. Love isn't about control. It's about connection. And connection requires vulnerability. It requires us to step out from behind our walls and say, this is me, this is what I feel, this is what I see in you. And maybe that's why so few women say what men long to hear. Not because they don't feel it, but because expressing it means embracing their own vulnerability. It means trusting that their words will be received, that their love will be valued, that their openness won't be taken for granted. It's a risk, but love, real love, has always been a risk worth taking. Because here's the truth. There is no strength without vulnerability. The strongest people are not the ones who never fall, but the ones who rise again and again, even when the world gives them every reason not to. And love is no different. Love isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about showing up even when it's hard. It's about speaking your heart even when it's terrifying. It's about saying the words that matter even when silence feels safer. When a man hears the words he longs for, it's not just the words that heal him. It's the vulnerability behind them. It's knowing that someone cared enough to risk being open, to risk being seen. And in that moment, something shifts. The walls come down, even if just for a moment. The weight is lifted, even if just for a while. And love, in all its messy, imperfect beauty, is finally felt. So maybe the question isn't why so few women say these words. Maybe the question is, what would love look like if we all found the courage to say what we feel, to acknowledge what we see, to offer our hearts without fear? Because the bravest thing we can ever do is love fully, fiercely, and without reservation. You said expand key point 6 into a 650-word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech and aligns seamlessly with the other key points. Keep the tone conversational, avoiding any headings. Conclude with a strong, concise closing line for impact, and write it as though Priyanka Chopra himself is delivering it live to an audience. Do not directly mention his name, ChatGPT said. Life in all its complexity often feels like an endless search for meaning. We move through days filled with expectations, responsibilities, and dreams, hoping to find moments that make it all worthwhile. And in that search, love becomes our compass. Love, with all its imperfections, becomes a thread that ties together our stories, our struggles, our triumphs. It is the silent force that pushes us forward when everything else seems to hold us back. Yet love is never just one thing. It's not just grand gestures or whispered promises. It's not just passion or comfort. Love is a language with many dialects, each one speaking to a different part of who we are. And one of the most profound dialects of love is acknowledgement. The simple act of saying, I see you, I value you, I'm proud of you. These words, though simple, have the power to transform moments into memories, effort into purpose, and existence into significance. But why do these words matter so much, especially to men? Maybe it's because in a world that often measures worth by achievements, men find themselves constantly trying to prove their value. Maybe it's because despite all the noise around them, they often feel unheard. Or maybe it's simply because love, when spoken, has a way of reaching places within us that even the most profound actions cannot touch. And here's where the beauty of balance comes in. We've talked about how rare these words are, how much they are longed for, and how deeply they are felt when finally spoken. But now, let's talk about why this balance matters. Not just for men, not just for women, but for all of us. Love isn't meant to be a one-sided offering. It's not meant to be withheld like a prize or given like an obligation. Love is meant to flow freely, a continuous exchange of presence, understanding, and acknowledgement. Imagine a world where love wasn't rationed, where words of affirmation weren't rare but abundant. Would love lose its value? Or would it finally become what it was always meant to be, a source of strength, healing, and connection? We often fear that saying too much will dilute our feelings, but perhaps the opposite is true. Perhaps love, like a river, only grows stronger when it is allowed to flow without restraint. Men love to hear words that affirm their worth, not because they need validation, but because those words serve as a reminder that their journey is seen, their effort is recognized, and their presence is valued. And when women find the courage to say these words, it's not just the men who are healed, it's the women too. Because in expressing love openly, we allow ourselves to experience it more fully. But balance doesn't mean symmetry. It doesn't mean that love must always be given and received in equal measure. Balance means harmony. It means understanding that love will sometimes be silent and sometimes loud, sometimes steady and sometimes fleeting. And that's okay. Because love in its truest form is not about perfection, it's about presence. There will be times when men need to hear those words more than women feel ready to say them. And there will be times when women need to feel seen in ways men may not fully understand. But love asks us to bridge those gaps, to meet each other where we are, and to offer what we can, even when it feels difficult. In the end, the rarity of these words is not just about gender, it's about humanity. It's about all of us learning to express love in ways that matter. It's about finding the courage to say what our hearts have always known, but our lips have often left unsaid. Because love is not just something we feel, it's something we give. And the more we give, the more we receive. And perhaps the greatest act of love is not waiting for the perfect moment, but creating it with our words, our presence, and our truth.